Hello and welcome back to another episode of Critical Reactions with your host Bryan. We're going to continue on with this week's theme of the Sonic Apocalypse, songs that talk about or sound like apocalyptic ideas, the end times. Today we're going to be looking at Have a Nice Life with the track Earthmover. Now, technically, I have heard this before. Sometime in 2021, I was asked to check this song out. All I know about it is that it's Have a Nice Life, so I'm expecting gaziness, but I don't remember anything about this track in particular. So, we're going to dive into this. I do kind of want to see how the 4 years between the last time I heard it and when I heard it now, how my ideas have differed. So I'm going to do my analysis after this video, typical stuff. And then when I pause for lyrics, I'm also going to go back and listen to my original reaction and talk about that a little bit if there's anything worth bringing up. So let's dive into this, see what Have a Nice Life is bringing to the table today. Very tinny guitar there. We have a solid 4/4 setup. Lots of reverb and size on the vocals. And a rather quiet section. I mean, we're looking at 50 to 60% volume. Okay. Really interesting drum production on this so far. Just a ton of reverb on it, but also very treble based. You know what's interesting too is it feels very comfortable. It's heavy, it's overbearing, sure, but like a comfortable weight. A little bit of longing here, especially with how, the length of time that the guitar sits on a chord without progressing. Just very much stuck in a place. Oh, that's a warm harmony. A little bit disjointed too with the vocal layers. They're not precise variants of when attacks begin and held out notes stop. There is so much fuzz and crispiness on the outside of this track. Because of the sheer treble on the guitar here, the tremolo picking sounds like a siren to me. A little bit of hope on that melody line, but so much, I don't know how to describe it. Give me a moment. Despair. I think that's the emotion I want to go with this. It sits underneath everything though. It's a little bit of the chordal information alongside the melody. Okay. Have a nice life. I think it's best to talk about this song in three parts. The opening of the track, which is more shoegazy, and then we enter into we bring in some of that noise, the meteor guitar alongside that. That's a new section that kind of dips down into what could be seen as a third section, but is pretty much a revisiting of the gazier intro, and then the final like 6 minute outro. So soft, loud drone. That's kind of how I envision the movements in this track. Now, the soft part, I never quite landed on an emotional element of this. There's a lot of reverb on everything. The drums are very treble EQ. In fact, a lot of this stuff's very treble EQ. It tends to feel lighter and thinner than I think it implies. When I listen to some of these instruments, I don't expect these timbres for them. And so I find that the song tends to gravitate more towards a higher range resonance than a lower range one. It really is only the drone electric guitar that has any sort of really low, deep bassiness to it. And even that is sort of not low. It's like mid low. So it's a song that ends up feeling quite a bit lighter than it feels like it should. And this is evident right at the start with the snare drum, which lacks a lot of its bassier resonances. But it has a lot of reverb on it. Everything has reverb. The vocals have reverb. The guitars have reverb. Everything's just really big and wavy. The vocals come through. They're kind of lost in the mix. It feels like poor production to me, but when you take everything else into account, it's it's intentional. It's creating a very specific vibe here. There's something that I described as comfortable, though. There's a general weightiness to this, especially once we hit the heavier part and bring the electric guitar in. It feels weighty, but it doesn't feel miserable. It doesn't feel negative in any way. It's sort of a neutral sound, an acceptance of the way things are, possibly. Maybe it doesn't know about positive or negative. It simply is a sort of musical foundation of existence. But it is big. It is weighty. But unlike doom metal, unlike post metal, it just doesn't feel negative through that weight. And a lot of that comes through in the chord progression of it. It just feels kind of neutral. It just is. And I find that to be a really interesting emotion to pair with this. The big reverberary sounds, they indicate, a vastness, a largeness of space. You bring in that electric guitar, it brings in its own type of weight, the tremolo picking, creating this, wall of sounds. It's dominant in the mix too. But the atmosphere, the emotion, it's kind of saying whatever. This is just the way things are. The heavier section also brings in a vocal choir. A lot of vocals, but they're not perfectly synchronized. This could also just be part of this lower fidelity aesthetic. Instead of using multiple takes or software in order to create perfect starts and stops for the choir, they sort of just come in and leave whenever they want. We might have a downbeat and some vocals will come in before it, some will come in after it, some will come in on the beats, and it creates this swell basically of vocals. And the same thing is true when the vocals fade out. Some vocalists drop the note earlier than others, and it creates this area of the note stopping rather than a moment that the note stops. To me, it simply indicates a group out of sync. What that has to do with anything else I'm listening to, I don't know. Again, it could just be an aesthetic choice. But I find that interesting to go there because we already had the single vocals. I thought they were fine. We didn't necessarily need to add the choir. I do like the vocal stacks harmonically, what we get there. Very cool harmonies, but it's an interesting choice to go for a lack of precision on that. And that's really, aside from the guitar, which I've already touched on, kind of juxtaposes the feeling of the song by adding in weight, but not adjusting the emotional component. And that's kind of it for that section. So we have acceptance or existence. We have weight alongside that and a loosely connected group. And then we have the outro. And boy, howdy, is this long outro. Not a big fan of it. I thought it was kind of cool to start with. They did some neat variation at the end, but they took their time playing this over and over and over. Now, the emotion does change here. Something about the chord progression. There's also a longing element to it. I'd mentioned that the chord progresses slowly, much slower than it used to. We are holding on to notes for quite some time before moving on to the next, and we're going to hold that one out for quite some time. It's not just holding the note out. There is some variance in the rhythmic pattern to it, but we're not changing that chord. It's about being stuck, I think. And this actually transforms the emotional side too, alongside this feeling of not progressing anywhere. We have the chord progression, which is different from where we were earlier, where that felt a bit more static or resigned or, just existing. Neutral is the term. This is melancholic. I had mentioned the word despair, and I still think that's rather accurate to describe the final half of this track. There is a positivity in that doon, 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 doon. A little bit of resolution to those four notes that acts as the only real melody we have here. There is some resolution. The second note in particular is an uplift, not just moving from a lower note to a higher note, but moving towards a point of strength. That is a very strong movement there. We kind of dip down into a bit more tension and then resolve it. Pretty typical of functions of chords, but at the same time, it also tells a story. But there is a chord progression that's existing underneath all of this too, and that just feels like despair to me. It's not the same as melancholy. Despair is a lack of hope, lack of purpose, a lack of understanding paired with sorrow, paired with sadness. And I really feel that in the end. There's also the tremolo picked line. What's interesting here is we had this electric guitar earlier, and I didn't really catch this vibe from it. Maybe it's a production thing, maybe it's the specific note that's being droned on. It sounds like a siren. It's high pitched, it cuts through everything. The instrument's already louder than everything else in the band, which is similar to earlier when we heard this instrument. It's a warning tone that pairs against little bits of hope blanketed with despair. What does all of that mean? I have no idea. It is a wild series of emotions. Neutrality. What was the second one? I don't remember. Oh, longing. Neutrality, longing, despair. So this is just a downward slope. Starting neutral, hitting something a little bit lower, and then really plummeting down to the bottom. There is that quiet section right before the outro. After the big choir moment, we kind of bring things down quite a bit. We strip some of the instruments back. The vocals aren't the choir stack anymore. They're just a single, not whispered, but quiet vocal style. It feels very personal, almost as if someone is whispering to themselves, trying to make themselves feel better, trying to reassure them about the situation. I don't know. That's the general vibe I get out of it, though. And it's at the end of one of these statements that the guitar comes in and brings us into the outro, almost as if punctuating this feeling of things will get better, trying to reassure yourself. No, ain't gonna happen. Hit him with the hard stuff. And I think that's about it for this. I mean, the production is what the production is. It's rough around the edges, it's eclectic. I don't necessarily think that it's uninformed or amateurish. Everything seems to be done with intent to do what it does. Whoever's doing this vastly understands what production tricks can be used to achieve specific results, and they're just employing them in an unusual fashion. Very few artists, I think, would go in this direction, but they did. Not out of necessity, not out of a lack of funding or uh, knowledge, but because this is their intention. It's what they wanted out of it. Not really my cup of tea. I'm not a big fan of the treble leaning and the weird placement of things. The guitar is way too prominent. The vocals are way too tucked in, but they all present a very artistic picture of this story too. So they're not wrong. They're just not something I'm acclimated to. And then there's the drone. Not a big fan of the final 5 minutes. It's a great atmosphere. I got it after like a minute. I didn't need the other 4 minutes to get it. But I suppose there's also the feeling of the drone, the endlessness of it, being stuck in this sound. So again, not a bad choice, not a wrong choice, just not one particularly for me to enjoy casually. Artistically, solid. I'll definitely give him props for that. Let me hit some lyrics on this. Go back and listen to my old one as well and kind of have a little chat about all of this because I don't think we did lyrics back in 2021 either. So this would be the first time I'm exploring how the lyrics relate to the song. All right. So lyrically, this song is about Earth destroying golems. The intro says they're carved out of stone, earth, blood, and bone. They knock the mountains down, the earth's grating sounds. They soothe the great machine. And so there are these giant stone golems that go through and just flatten and level the earth. Says they knock mountains down. But the thing is, they want more. than this. It says they wander ridges high between the earth and the sky like spikes upon a crown we wear upon our brow. And want is not a need reserved for human beings. Its fingers on your throat is pain that all things know. It says that they want something more than this life, even as what they are. Originally, I had kind of pictured them as like elemental automatons, but it does say that they are made of blood and bone, sure, also stone and earth, but they're living creatures. And they want something more than this destructive life. And they say that this want isn't just for humans, it's something that they feel gripping them, choking them out. Fingers on your throat. Very vivid imagery of a want for a different life, one that's less destructive. In the quiet section, right before the moving into the final part of the track, it says an army of the golems is stalking now, eating all reality, producing only dust and sand. Nothing hurts them, and when their earthen mouths will open, and just what words will come out, but we wish we were dead. There is no destroying them. There is no defeating them or stopping them. They will flatten the entire earth and remove all life from it. That is their only task, and they seem to have no weakness. But the thing is, they don't want this life. And the schism between being born for one thing and hating doing that one thing is a destructive division in one's soul. To hate who you are, but unable to change, that is enough to break someone down. And so during this section, I had mentioned that it felt like a longing. Originally, reading the lyrics, I thought the longing was simply to do something else. But I think here at the end, the longing is just for death. It's the only thing that could stop them from doing what they were crafted for. And so the heavy instrumental part that comes in after that, that takes us to the end of the track, I talked, it was despair, a lack of hope. They know they can't be killed, but they also hope for that. And so once again, they cannot have what they want. And they're forced to be this thing that they do not want to be, with no escape, no change, no death. Yeah, that's a depressing track. And it makes the fuzziness and distortion of all of it kind of weigh a little bit more. Early on in the track, it mentions that the earth's grating sounds. I kind of picture this as, their bodies made of rock and stone grinding against the earth, also rock and stone and all sorts of other minerals and materials and stuff like that. Just feeling that sound in the music. Yeah, this is a heavy track. And the thing is too, I think it's very easy to be able to say, "Oh, this is a metaphor for anyone who feels like they are built or that they are capable of so much more than they will ever be able to achieve because of their situation, their standing, their, class in life." That it for one reason or another, it is difficult or impossible to break free and be something else, to feel constrained in a place and time that you do not want to be in. Maybe even for people who find themselves constantly stuck in destructive cycles. maybe self-destructive. Maybe they find it really easy to eliminate their friendships and relationships, any sort of social ties they have. And they find themselves alone often, not wanting to be alone, wanting to have a social life, but always self-destructing, not knowing how to get out of this cycle. Yeah, this is very easy to take into a more human direction because the golems themselves are already quite humanized. Now, I did go back. This is really interesting. Listening to this track the first time back in 21, I was more casual about it, not so analytical. I talked a lot about the atmosphere of it, the palpability and physicality of the sound of it, and that was about it. How it made me feel. And I didn't say a single negative thing. And I'll tell you what, man, 2021, I also, I don't know, I had no patience for long drawn out droney stuff. So I don't know, maybe I was just a little verbally nicer back then. But it's really interesting to go back and listen and see that I really only had one talking point. Hmm. All right. That's going to wrap up my thoughts on this one, though. Have a nice life, Earthmover. What did you think of this track? Is there anything that stood out to you? Anything that you would like to add on to what I said or correct me on? Maybe if you have your own thoughts, opinions, and perspective about this track, please put all of that and any other thoughts you have down into the comments section. Above that, in the description box, you'll find a link to Linktree. Takes you here. You can find links to my music, ways to support the channel, a link to the Discord server, and so much more. Above that, if you could, like, subscribe, and ring the bell, I greatly appreciate all three of those. All right. Why am I blanking out? That wraps it up for today. I'll be back tomorrow at 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 9 p.m. UTC, as usual. Until next time, remember to be critical, not cynical, of the music you listen to, and have a fantastic morning, afternoon, or evening, whenever you choose to watch my videos.